Welcome to Connecticut's Health Report, bringing you a special episode, Sunshine, Swimming and Staying Safe, with Connecticut Department of Public Health Commissioner, Dr. Manisha Jitani. Because being informed is the first step to being protected.
Good health doesn't just happen, it's built. The last time you buckled your seatbelt, did you think about it before you did it? Or turned on the tap and drank the water without a second thought? Or got a vaccine that didn't just protect you, but everyone around you? None of that happened by accident. Someone fought for it, proved it worked, and put data to action. Welcome to Connecticut's Health Report. I'm your host, Brittany Schaefer, joined by Department of Public Health Commissioner Dr. Manisha Jitani and Executive Director of the Stu Leonard III Water Safety Foundation, Ryann Leonard Grossbard. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
We are going full summer mode. Connecticut summers are wonderful. The beaches, the farm stands, the backyard cookouts, the smell of sunscreen on a warm Saturday morning. But summer also brings a set of health risks that are very real, very preventable, and sometimes very underestimated. We are covering 4 topics: pool safety, bacteria lurking in warm coastal waters, sun safety and skin cancer, and heat-related illnesses. So first, I want to start with you, Ryann. Tell me, what is the Stu Leonard III Water Safety Foundation, and what do you all do in Connecticut?
Yeah, so almost 38 years ago, my parents lost my brother, who was 21 months at the time, to drowning. And it was actually on my older sister's birthday. So it was a tragedy in every stretch of the imagination. But really, my parents after that realized, like, how did this happen to us? You know, they always thought it wouldn't. And my aunts and uncles were all there. My cousins were there. So there were a lot of adult eyes. And it just happened in a split second when, other people thought he was being watched by someone else. So my parents started the Water Safety Foundation in Stewie's honor. And their goal was really to spread water safety awareness because it is the leading cause of accidental death for kids under the age of 4. And they were like, we don't want this to happen to anyone else. So they actually started with a book, which is the little guy, Stewie, on my hat. They tried to make it really fun and exciting for kids to read this book and learn how to be safe around the water. And basically over the past 38 years, we have just been raising money to give back to local communities where kids can't afford swim lessons. So we've given out almost 300,000 free swim lessons now. And really that's our goal, is just teach kids how to swim, because there is a cure to drowning, and it is swim lessons. So that's what we try and do as much as we possibly can.
Incredible. Oh my, that's such great work that you all do. And the fact that you've given out that many free lessons is just so heartwarming from such a tragic story. So Commissioner, Connecticut has hundreds of public and private pools, water parks, splash pads that draw millions of visitors every summer. Can you walk us through the important prevention tips to drowning risks, especially for young children?
Absolutely, Brittany. And Ryan, I just want to take a moment again to thank you for helping us shed light on the most important reasons why we want to bring this to attention, and also for taking your family tragedy into something that is saving lives every single day going forward. So as we think about young children in our communities, it is always the most simple things that can really result in saving a life. When we think about pools, the fences that are around them have been put in place for a reason. Young children don't necessarily think about not just running right into a pool, so it's a deterrent. When we think about adults being present, the distractions are only so much more now than they were even 38 years ago for the Leonard family. People are on their phones, people are talking to friends, people are not necessarily paying attention, and every adult thinks that some other adult is paying attention. So really taking a moment, especially with our young children, to think about being cognizant of who's really in charge of watching a specific child. And on top of that, young children can drown in very little water. So if you think about the small pools that you may have and just fill up every time you are having a backyard party, empty those pools so that on those off chances when maybe a child is in the backyard, you don't have a drowning threat right there in your backyard that you can try to prevent.
Those are excellent tips. I wouldn't even think about emptying a pool on a day that I'm not using it. Very smart. So Ryan, if you could walk through just a lesson, or, if a family does go to the school, kind of what's a day like there?
Yeah. So one of our main things is obviously we want to teach kids how to swim, but we really encourage parents to get their kids in the pool as early as 6 months. And initially you think like your kid can barely do anything at that point. They can't crawl, they can't swim. But what we want is them to feel comfortable in the water. So we start with getting your ears wet, learning to float on your back. My parents say this, which like breaks my heart to hear, but they're like, if Stewie knew how to just turn over and float on his back, he would maybe still be alive today. So we really encourage parents to get their kids in the pool as early as possible. And really, like, there's so many things you can do for kids. And I actually signed my son up. The first thing I ever did was music class. And I was like, the first thing you should do is swim lessons. Music class isn't going to save my son's life one day, but swim lessons can. So that's one thing we really encourage parents to do is like forget about all the other activities first. Obviously do them eventually, but prioritize swim lessons first, because that can save your child's life.
And are these available year round?
So we have two swim schools, which one is in Norwalk, Connecticut, right across from Stu Leonard's. The other one is in Clifton, New Jersey, next to our Stu Leonard's food store there. So we have kids coming into those swim schools, but then we take all the profits from those two schools and give them back to local YMCA's, Boys and Girls Clubs, who have programming all year round.
It's unbelievable. And how can families sign up for your swim school or, partner, I guess, with other swim lessons?
So our website is stewietheduck.org, and all of our partners who we partner with are listed on there, and then our own swim lessons and swim schools. It's as easy as just downloading the app and going to our website.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we let you go?
Yeah, well, just to piggyback off of this conversation, the importance of having that water watcher, and my mom says the same line all the time, is like, put your phones away. And she once used the example, which resonated with me, of just like you have a designated driver, you're not assuming someone's going to be the designated driver. Like this is the designated driver. Same thing with when kids are in the pool, whether you think they can swim or not, have that one person who's designated. And when that water watcher is going inside to do something or going on their phone or whatever it is, hand off the responsibility to someone else. And that is so simple, but it really could make a difference. And the other thing, which has already been mentioned too, is like you could drown in any amount of water. And I actually made the mistake of leaving my little, blow up pool full of a few inches of water. And my mom came over and was like, Ryan, are you going to empty that? And I was like, oh my God, yes, I should. Like, I'm the one preaching water safety all the time, but I have two kids under 2. So my brain sometimes isn't working and I'm not thinking. So really just prioritizing and thinking about all of those things and just removing all those obstacles so that you can ensure your children are safe around the water.
Right.
And
I thank
Ryan,
you so much.
Your point about a designated driver and a designated watcher, I think that parallel is really important also from the perspective of maintaining your own senses. So the person who's the designated watcher, in terms of alcohol, other substances, anything that could cloud your ability to be that person who's going to respond, who's going to be watching the kids in a way that you can jump into action very quickly, is just as important as being a designated driver.
Yep, exactly. I know, and my mom has said so many times, if everyone's watching, no one's watching.
That's
So
exactly
it's like
right.
having that designated person.
Ryan, I thank you so much for joining us, for sharing such a personal story, and for driving the impact that you do across so many communities here in Connecticut and New Jersey. As a new mom of a 6-month-old, I'm like, I
Oh,
now have new homework to do.
yes, get them into swim class.
Thank you so very much. It was great having you on.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Take care. So bringing this conversation in person, Commissioner, beyond drowning, pools carry a different category of risk that people think about much less: recreational water illnesses. Can you explain what they are and what risks they bring?
So in pools, people are familiar with chlorine, of course, to try to keep out many of the pathogens that can make people sick. But the reality is that if you have a baby in a diaper and maybe it's a dirty diaper, things can leak out into the pool. And so it is a lot of the gastrointestinal bugs that we need to worry about when kids are going to be exposed, and adults for that matter as well. So there are pathogens like Cryptosporidium and E. coli and norovirus that can make people sick in these settings. Now, when we think about it, it's really not just pools. If we think about the other water activities that people are engaged in the summertime, it could be splash pads, it could be smaller backyard pools that people have, it could be hot tubs. And each have slightly different risks, but they're all basically the same. And so a lot of those GI bugs, you want to be aware of them, particularly as it relates to splash pads. We did have a law passed where we have signage in front of splash pads reminding people that it is recirculated water that is being in the system. And our local health departments actually work with different areas to make sure that that water is safe and so that people can enjoy their time when they're out there. But we want people to remember this because, again, if there are a lot of children in pools, we know that there could be more things that can put you at risk. The other thing I would just mention as it relates to hot tubs is there are different bugs like Pseudomonas or Aeromonas that like water and can hang out in hot tubs for longer periods of time. So if you freshly shave your legs, as an example, and then you go and soak in a hot tub, this could be a portal of entry for bacteria that are already there. So you may want to let a day or two go by, maybe. And so that way you can sort of heal up those fresh areas that maybe you shaved that can at least reduce your risk going forward.
I would never think of that. And I feel like a lot of ladies, including myself, that's something you do kind of right before you jump in the water. So that's great to know. And those GI bugs are no joke. So Connecticut is blessed with beautiful beaches and world-class shellfish, but warm summer seawater also creates conditions for a bacteria called Vibrio to thrive. Let's start with the basics. What is Vibrio and how can people get the infection?
Again, it's one that really likes salt water or brackish water, and it tends to thrive in warm water. So what we have seen over the last several years, and it does cycle, but with our warming coastal temperatures, we have seen this bacteria that often we see infections in Texas or Florida moving up the coast. So North Carolina, right here in Connecticut over the last several years, we've had infections. And usually people can get this either by having an open wound. So as I mentioned with the shaving, similar idea. If you actually have some sort of illness that results in an open wound on your leg, let's say you have diabetes or something along those lines where you have an open wound, and you now go into salt water, you can have direct infection of that wound. And those are the types of situations that we've seen situations occur in Connecticut so far.
And Commissioner, what point should someone get medical help and who is at most risk of a severe or life-threatening Vibrio infection?
So you can get Vibrio in two ways. One, you can ingest it, and that would cause more of a diarrheal type illness to start. Or you can get direct inoculation, so direct infection directly into a wound, as I mentioned, if you have a wound that has direct contact. So if you notice that your wound looked like one thing to begin with, and all of a sudden now it is looking worse, the leg shaving that I mentioned before, that could also potentially be a risk. So again, if you just notice that your skin all of a sudden is looking different and it is looking worse very rapidly, that is the thing that should really bring you to medical attention, because this infection, the reason we warn people about it is that it can take off very quickly and become more severe very quickly. As a diarrheal illness, it's like many of the other diarrheal illnesses that we can get. And so again, if you're losing a lot of water and you are losing a lot of stool very quickly, that can dehydrate you very quickly, and you want to present to medical attention in that way.
Now, Connecticut has a robust shellfish monitoring program run by DPH, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and the Department of Agriculture. For this reason, I ask my servers and make sure that I am getting shellfish, oysters just from Connecticut. Can you walk listeners through what the system looks like and what it means for shellfish safety in our state?
So very proud of this program that we have in collaboration with our other state partners, because we do monitor shellfish from Connecticut. And so what that does is it reduces significantly the risk of getting an infection like Vibrio. This was put in place years ago to try to make it as safe as possible for people to consume shellfish that they get here in Connecticut. Now, one of the challenges, though, when you go to a restaurant is you may not know whether those harvested shellfish were from Connecticut shores or not. And not every state has the same type of monitoring system that we do. So what I can say is if you do ask, as you said, Brittany, whether it was harvested here in Connecticut, it can give you a little bit more peace of mind that your chance of getting Vibrio is much less if you got some that were harvested right here in Connecticut.
And it tastes delicious. Coming here from Connecticut, we have great shellfish. So skin cancer is the most common cancer in the United States, more common than all other cancers combined. And yet sun protection remains one of the most inconsistently practiced public health behaviors we have. Can you walk us through the main types of skin cancer, including what they look like and how they behave?
So melanoma is the one we worry about the most as it relates to exposure to the sun. And we have seen since the 90s, when sun protection tools came out and people were really starting to use them more, using sunscreen more, that our rates of melanoma in Connecticut have consistently come down, which is really reassuring that when you have public health interventions that are utilized, we actually have tools to reduce the risk from this type of cancer. People may have heard of other types of cancers as well, like basal cell carcinoma or squamous cell carcinoma, which are other skin cancers. But melanoma tends to be the one that can be the most deadly if it spreads beyond your skin. There's a lot of press right now out there about maybe potentially bad impacts of sunscreen. And what we really know is that there are much more beneficial impacts than bad ones. There is also a new agent, BEMT, that's been authorized by the FDA just in the last few weeks, was authorized in Europe and Asia for decades. It's been 20 years since we've had a new agent on the market here in the United States. It is not absorbed by the rest of your body. I'm sure we will start to see products coming onto the market now that it has been approved. The main point is that please use sunscreen. Please think about hats. Please think about having light clothing on covering your skin so that you can reduce your risk of skin cancer to the best that you can.
There's so many simple steps that people can take to better protect themselves. Now, when should Connecticut residents get a skin cancer screening, and what does that look like?
Really, you want to be looking at yourself on a regular basis, but every year to get your skin checked out and just make sure that there aren't any areas that are changing. So in particular, if you have something that you thought was just a mole, but all of a sudden its borders are looking more irregular, it's growing in ways that you haven't noticed before, you want to make sure you get that checked out. But getting your skin checked out, at least on a yearly basis, is a good way to have somebody else looking at you and evaluating that there's nothing that looks different than in the past.
Now, as Connecticut summers grow hotter and heat events become more frequent and more intense, this is a public health challenge our state cannot afford to take lightly. Let's talk about the difference between heat exhaustion and heat stroke and who is at most risk here.
We really worry about our youngest and oldest when it relates to heat. And so when we have these really hot days, we try to issue warnings so that, for example, if kids are in school or daycare, they really think twice about when they should be letting people outside. We do know also that we have cooling centers that are set up by the state in order to make sure that older people have places to go. And so we want to really make sure that people have the tools, whether it be going to a library or an actual cooling center, to be able to keep your core temperature down so that you don't actually have heat exhaustion. And heat stroke is a far more extreme case of that. And so if you feel like you're going to pass out, you're starting to lose consciousness, you feel extremely thirsty, you're sweating beyond being able to combat it by what fluids you take in, you really want to get some attention.
Well, Commissioner Giuttani, thank you so much for this important conversation at an important time heading into these really hot summer days. Residents can find more information on the Connecticut DPH website. Every Connecticut resident who listens to this episode will be a little better protected this summer because of this conversation, and that's exactly what this podcast is for. Until next time, this is Connecticut's Health Report.
Thanks for joining us. Catch the full video on YouTube and stay connected with us on social media for the latest on health in CT. See you next episode.